Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you back to another episode of Books and Looks. Yes, it's our weekly voyage discovery into the wonderful world of books. The best of history, mystery, fiction, and nonfiction that I've been reading, along with exclusive interviews with the authors, something you don't find many places at all, but they're all here on Books and Looks. And what else is here? A big shout out to our partner, booktrip.com. Again, anything you want in terms of books, you're going to find it right there. And let's not forget that booksandlookspodcast.com. I'm telling you, great site. You can find everything there you need to know about Books and Looks. I love it. It's great. Thank you. Thank you, my webmaster, my producer, Nathaniel DeSantis, for all that work. Anyway, hey, this year we're going to step back in time to the unforgettable year of 1978. Yes, we have a nonfiction book for today, friends. Now, 1978, disco fever grips the nation. Baseball provides thrills, heartbreaks, and controversies. They still resonate today. In his newest book, 1978, Baseball in America in the Disco Era, David Krell weaves a captivating tapestry of the events and personalities that defined that pivotal year, both on and off the diamond. From the Yankees and the Red Sox rivalry reaching a boiling point to cultural touchstones that shaped a generation. This book is nostalgic, this book is insightful, and it's a journey through a defining time in American history. We talk baseball, we talk movies, we talk TV shows, you name it, we've got it here all this week. So anyway, I'm Blaine DeSantis. This is Books and Looks, and today I'm interviewing David Krell about his new book, 1978, Baseball and America in the Disco Era. David Krell, welcome to Books and Looks.
Thank you, Blaine. It's great to be here.
It is wonderful, friends. What a book. I'm going to host it up here. Whoa, I'm knocking things over here. 1978, Baseball and America in the Disco Age. Oh, my God. What a great book. I love that book. And you interweave culture with baseball so that I know I have some friends and some followers who are baseball fans. You're going to love it. I have others who don't have an idea what baseball is. They will understand the culture. And so this is a great book for everybody. So thanks for writing this book.
Thank you. Very generous words.
Well, we're going to try to go as far as we can, month by month, bit by bit, building up 1978. Why did you write it this way with baseball and culture, and why did you choose 1978?
Well, I've done two books in this format before, 1962 and another book about 1966 called Do You Believe in Magic? And I just found it very compelling to research a year and what was going on in the background of baseball, what was going on in the culture, what were people watching on television, what were the popular songs, what were the fashions, what was going on in politics. And my goal, Blaine, is if you were to tell me that you were going into a time machine back to that year, I would give you this book to read beforehand to remind you and give you a flavor of what everyday life was like for a baseball fan in that season. So it's an easy format, as you know, January through December. And it's, I think, a breakdown of about 70% baseball and 30% everything else.
Well, that's great. It was well done. I'll tell you what. We begin back in January. And the very interesting thing that Bowie Kuhn, for those of you who don't know him, the former commissioner of baseball, stops Charlie Finley from selling or trading players to teams. He uses something called the best interest of baseball. Uh, Tell us about what that is, and also if it still can be used, what would Bowie Kuhn say about the Los Angeles Dodgers and those deferred salaries they're doing?
To your first point, it means whatever the commissioner says it means in 1978, which apparently was unfettered authority. He prevented players from going to other teams, primarily wealthier teams. And he said, we can't have just a few teams with deep pockets having the best players. Regarding what he would say today, the economic pressures are different and the money is different. So a player can make maybe 100 million going to a big market team and 87 million going to a smaller market team. Well, is it worth that much if the smaller market team is competitive or if the smaller market team is in Florida where the tax advantage may be greater? It might not matter. 100 million over, let's say, 8 seasons in New York or Los Angeles is not the same as 85 million in Florida, where you have or Las Vegas. We're going to have the Las Vegas Ace in a couple of years. So you might get more endorsement opportunities in a certain city. You might get more tax advantages in a certain city. So Kuhn would have to navigate that in terms of what he would allow and not allow. Plus, the players' union is stronger now than it was in 1978. So you would have the players lobbying against the commissioner saying, wait a minute, you can't tell me where to go. That's a restraint of trade. And this best interest of baseball clause is overreaching. That's my feeling anyway.
But now, what about a guy like Ohtani, who's got is being deferred over 20 years? You think he would have liked something like that?
I don't think any player would like a commissioner to say you cannot go to a certain team because it would cause an imbalance. Well, of course there are imbalances. Of course there are imbalances. And you get a great player who is on a mediocre team. Is that fair to the player to say after his contract's up, he can't go to a competitor? He can't go to somebody, to an owner's team who's a contender? I think about when I grew up and there were players like Earl Campbell on the Houston Oilers, but the Houston Oilers never made it to the Super Bowl. It was always the Steelers or the Cowboys in those days, or at least that's the way it seemed. Are you going to tell that player he can't go to the Steelers or the Cowboys and get to a Super Bowl because you want parity?
Well, let's bring that right up to date. Saquon Barkley left those lousy New York Giants and went down the highway, and my Eagles got them, and now they're Super Bowl champions. So it does certainly allow that player that ability to go and get things and do things. And I agree, but I just interesting that was a big concept back in '78. But I got to go to February. Got to move to February because February, you and I get excited. Pitchers and catchers report. How many days the countdown goes. But there was something else. There was a blizzard, which I had completely forgotten about in 1978. And then there was something about Robin Williams. Yeah, the comedian. Tell us a bit about those two.
Well, the blizzard was epic. It hit the mid-Atlantic. It hit the northeastern part of the United States. New England got walloped. I lived in northern New Jersey, and I think our school was out of commission for a week, I believe. I believe in my memory it was 5 days where we had to make them up at the end of the year. It was startling. All over the news. This is before 24-hour news. All the New York stations had special coverage. And it's very exciting when you're a kid. When you're a grown-up, not so much, because remember, this is 1978. No internet, no email. So parents who had to go to work, either through a bus, a train, on the highway, they were stuck inside with nothing to do. Usually parents brought home maybe a night's worth of work if they had a big project or something. And that wasn't the case with people who had a home office and could just say, well, I'll just work on what I'm working on. The Robin Williams appearance on Happy Days vaulted him into superstar status literally overnight. I remember going to school the next day and every kid was talking about that episode. We had never seen anything like that on Happy Days or any other show. He dominated. And when you see the interviews that other cast members have done about that night, I mean, Happy Days was on for what, 10, 11 seasons? That night stands out. And they said to a person, he was a dynamic force. And he was a replacement. They didn't have anybody at the middle of the week. They're taping on Friday night and it's Wednesday and they don't have somebody for that role as Mork from Ork, the alien. He comes in and just absolutely devastates the crowd. In the audition or the meeting, Jerry Paris, who was the director, in Anson Williams' account, he says that Jerry Paris came out into the studio, said, "He's a genius, he's a genius, he's a genius." And then later that fall, we got Mork and Mindy, the spinoff, and Robin Williams had a very long and rich career in movies and television.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But Nanu Nanu, that was something we all knew about there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it came into the lexicon. Well, now I got to go to March. March comes, and in March, Tommy Lasorda takes over March. He hates everybody, or if he doesn't hate them, he's got an epic rivalry with everybody. Sparky Anderson, he didn't like the Phillies, he didn't like anybody else. It was Dodger Blue. Tell us about Tommy.
Well, Tommy Lasorda, as you know, Blaine, was a passionate person, especially when it came to baseball. And the Dodgers were close to his heart. I can't imagine Tommy Lasorda in another uniform. I just can't. But March was important because we started to see spring training games, and the Dodgers would have to compete for the title again. They lost the 77 series to the Yankees, but they had great players. Davey Lopes, who became the captain, Ron Say, Steve Garvey, Reggie Smith, Tommy John. These were solid players. I knew when the Mets played the Dodgers, they were playing the elite squad of the National League, or one of the elite squads of the National League. And Lasorda was the spokesperson. I might have to go to my baseball cards to find out who was the manager of the Cubs or the Tigers or the Astros. You didn't need a baseball card to tell you who managed the Dodgers. He was out in front. He was great copy for sports writers, a great presence on TV when he gave interviews. And he's synonymous, as you allude to, synonymous with the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he and Anderson with the Reds just started sniping at each other. I mean, it was back and forth, and no one was going to back down. So, yep, he set that tone, and the Dodgers, where they followed him, and hell of a good team. Oh my God! I just finished up law school out there in L.A., and I got used to old Walter Johnson, Walter Alston, and he's a very calm person. And here comes Tommy Lasorda. And boy, oh boy, what a change. But let's go then to April. Now, April is fascinating because we have the development and it comes out. The Philly Fanatic, the ultimate sports mascot, is debuted in Philadelphia, the Fanatic. And we also have something called Dallas, which all the critics say is going to be a terrible show. Tell us about those two features.
Well, the Fanatic is fun.
Mm-hmm.
A Mets fan, a Tigers fan, a Cubs fan, any fan will accede to the fact that the Fanatic is fun. He just exudes happiness and joy. When he comes out onto the turf in that trike, riding that trike, it's joyful. And he premiered in 1978. Nobody knew what it was. And he very quickly became an icon of endearment for Phillies fans, and I would dare say fans across baseball. Dallas was a 5-part miniseries. Larry Hagman stars as J.R. Ewing. It revolves around the Ewing family, which is an oil dynasty, for lack of a better word. And it was soap opera. And as you say, and as I write in the book, critics were harsh. They did not like this. They thought it was beneath what television should be, that it was tacky, that it was just absolutely what's the word I'd say? Junk.
That's a good word, yeah.
Unquality, but junk. And the fact is that people flocked to it, so much so that over the 5-episode miniseries, it brought an audience that convinced CBS to produce this as a weekly series. And it became a cornerstone of the Friday night lineup on CBS for 13 years until 1991. Couple that with 2 TV movies, and then the reboot on TNT. Couple that with the Knots Landing spinoff, which lasted an incredibly long time.
Longer than Dallas, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 14 seasons. And you have one 5-episode miniseries spawning millions and millions and millions of dollars in advertising, creating jobs for people in the entertainment industry. It shows you, what do critics know? What do critics know? And the other thing that I had forgotten about, Blaine, is it was timely because the oil crisis that hit in the 70s, I think we had 2, I believe. So that hits headlines. Why wouldn't you wanna see the machinations behind the scenes? Who wouldn't want to be in a family that's worth a couple of $1 billion controlling oil?
And from the United States. Yeah.
Right, the characters were good, they were drawn very well and developed over time. Larry Hagman, we hadn't really seen in anything substantive on television since I Dream of Jeannie went off the air in 1970. And he tells a story that he had a choice between 2 projects, Dallas and the Waverly Wonders. It's good that he picked Dallas. He changed the face of television and certainly elevated salaries for actors. He set a precedent. I believe that he became the first actor to make $100,000 an episode on television.
Wouldn't surprise me. Wow, that's interesting. Didn't know that. 2 things. I went up to Cooperstown. I saw one mascot in the Hall of Fame, and that was the Philly Fanatic. Now, maybe more are there now, but when I went up there was the Fanatic standing in the one room.
The chicken is there too, I think.
Is he there? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Who was completely different. They not at all lovable to me.
Right. Well, the chicken was zany.
Mm-hmm.
The chicken
Right.
was good for This Week in Baseball and other clips. Like, growing up in the New York area, you had Warner Wolf
Right.
doing the sports cast on WABC and then WCBS. So it was good visually because he
Mhm.
was so wacky, and he had the exposure on Johnny Bench's show,
Right.
the baseball blind.
Right. Right. The other thing is, have you ever been down to South Fork? You ever make it down there to the ranch?
No, I would like to someday.
Yeah, I've been there. I found out when every time you saw Bobby swimming in that Olympic pool they had in the background,
Yeah.
wasn't an Olympic pool, wasn't very big. What they did was they strapped a mirror
Right.
on him, so they filmed it, and it looked like it was in this huge pool, and it really wasn't that big. But
Right, and when you watch it now, you can tell when the pool shots are studio
yeah,
or exterior on location.
yep, interesting stuff. What a show! Hey, I got to go to May, and there's a guy named Dave Kingman. Now, Dave Kingman, he could hit some prodigious home runs, and he did something to the Dodgers that set off Tommy Lasorda again. Tell us about why Tommy got upset this time.
Well, Dave Kingman was my favorite player growing up. We had the same name, we had the same initials, and I loved when he played for the Mets, watching him swat the ball over the fence. He plays for the Cubs in this particular game that you're referencing. Uh, he played for many teams. In this particular game, the Cubs, and the Cubs play the Dodgers. Kingman hits 3 home runs, and a reporter after the game asks a tremendously benign question. He might as well have been asking Tommy Lasorda, "What's your favorite kind of steak? Porterhouse, T-bone, New York, strip? What's your favorite color?" Instead, he asks, "What did you think of Kingman's performance?" Any other manager would have said, "He's a tremendous asset. What a force. Kingman is one of the most powerful batters in the league." Instead, Lasorda goes on a rather florid rant using just about every permutation of the F word, which you can find on YouTube, and for no good reason. The reporter was not being obstinate or arrogant or provocative in any way, but it set Lasorda off because he was frustrated not just to lose the game, but for Kingman to hit 3 home runs.
Yep, no doubt about it. Ay, 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 ay. Hey, by the way, I think Dave Kingman the forerunner of today's baseball player. I think he'd make hundreds of millions of dollars. What do you think?
As a DH, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised in going over his career excuse me, going over his career that he was not recruited by more American League teams because there were better outfielders defensively, and he would have been a tremendous asset for an AL squad just in the DH position.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's very he's certainly the game now is you swing and you miss or you hit a home run, and that's what he sort of led everybody on that. Hey, I want to go to one of the great performances you highlight in the month of June. Louisiana Lightning, Ron Guidry. Wow. What a year he had. I don't think it's been topped since 1978. Tell us about Louisiana Lightning and Ron Guidry.
Well, Guidry is a force in '78, the likes of which we hadn't seen maybe since Sandy Koufax. And he goes 25-3. Nobody can hit him. On a June night, he racks up a tremendous amount of strikeouts. I think it's 18 strikeouts if I'm have my math correct. And what can you say about him? He was just a dominant force. That night is when fans rose on the second strike, according to Guidry. That's when the tradition began. It's more for the Yankees. Other teams have adopted it somewhat, but at Yankee Stadium, it's automatic. When a Yankees pitcher has two strikes on a batter, everybody stands. And it started that night.
Isn't that something? Wow. Wow. It was 25-3. He had God knows how many hundreds of strikeouts. Now we can't get pitchers to go 5 innings. Will it ever be topped?
I don't think so, because if you look at what the pitchers are racking up today in terms of complete games and looking at the league leaders versus the league leaders from 40 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
no comparison. And they just don't have the opportunity. It's not that they can't do it. It's not a knock on their ability or their stamina. The game has shifted in terms of strategy where you're bringing in a pitcher for a certain batter or a certain inning, and that's it. You're not letting them work out of the inning.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And back in the day, we get that's later on, but still, back in the day, you'd have Sparky Lyle. You have Goose Gossage going 3 innings. A reliever going 3 innings nowadays? Well, no. Now, Taijuan Walker went 3 last night for the Phillies because they were losing so badly. But other than that, no one's going to put a guy in for 3 innings. So very fascinating. And he wasn't a big man. He wasn't 6'5", 6'6". He was not that tall. And they weren't worrying about spin rates or things like that. He was just so good that year. So I enjoyed him. Yep. Now I got to go to July. And now Billy Martin erupts. Billy Martin erupts and says things, probably truisms, by the way, about Reggie Jackson and George Steinbrenner. Oops. That sets off another whole explosion. What happened? Tell us about those things.
Well, Billy Martin said some not so kind things about his star player and his boss, and he resigns. Whether he got pushed, that's a matter of debate. But at any rate, he leaves the Yankees and they bring in Bob Lemon. Bob Lemon, the great pitcher for the Indians from decades ago, had managed the White Sox. Lemon brings calm to the Yankees clubhouse, where before there was chaos and conflict. So you can't perform when there's chaos and conflict. Lemon treats the players as men, treats them as professionals, and there's a certain lessening of the burden of just coming into work because Blaine, when somebody leaves a job, it's very rarely because of the job itself. It's because of bureaucracy. It's because of the bosses. It's because of budgetary reasons. It could be a combination. But you had Yankees who were vocal in the papers saying, "I don't want to be here next year," and they were quoted directly. You didn't see an unnamed player. You saw the actual player's name. So that's how unhappy they were. Lemon comes in, and the Red Sox are ahead in the standings by a tremendous amount of games. There's no way the Yankees can catch up. But as we later find out, the Yankees start creeping up little by little. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Now, also, you bring up that in that month of July, the hot summer, we got disco really hitting everything. I mean, my God, you got Donna Summer, you got Gloria Gaynor. Wow, how big was disco, David?
Disco in the late '70s was as big as surfing in the mid '60s with the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean and other folks. You had, excuse me, Saturday Night Fever in 1977. The soundtrack is released, and it's a top performer in '78. You had Gloria Gaynor with "I Will Survive." It was a just dominating popular culture for a short period of time. By the early '80s, it was gone. But for that brief snippet, for those 4 or 5 years from '75 to '80, let's say, disco was everywhere with Donna Summer at the pinnacle.
Right, right. Now, here's something I may know, you might not. Now, let's see if you knew this. In 1978, ABBA brought out their only 2 disco songs,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Voulez-Vous and Does Your Mother Know? And they never made it. It was good. We all know it now, everybody can sing it now, but back then they were not the hits because that wasn't ABBA disco. But that's how prevalent it was that the Swedish group had to bring out disco. And yeah, and then of course we all know in 1979 the infamous disco death to disco in Chicago, and it was a real hoot where they blew up all those records. Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's how prevalent it was.
that was not baseball's finest hour.
No,
That was a promotion gone awry.
yeah, it was, but it also showed that when you begin to see that trend against disco, and
Right,
they come out and say, "Oh, it was anti this, it was because of that." No, I just got tired that, and we had songs like Disco Duck. I mean, come on, how
right.
bad was Rick Dees doing Disco Duck? It was terrible.
It was a novelty, but that's what the culture
Yeah,
was in
mhm,
1977,
that's right.
78, where Saturday Night Fever elevated disco to this absolute, prolific presence across radio, record players. I mean, there wasn't a household in America that had a record player that didn't have the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna have to skip a little bit until we get to September. We've got the Boston Massacre. We got what happened to the Red Sox that year?
Very quickly, the Yankees came into Fenway Park for 4 games, and not only do they win all 4 games, they absolutely clobber the Red Sox in the first 2. New Englanders are demoralized, the press is demoralized in Boston, and it just looks like they're deteriorating. The Yankees, for whatever reason, were able to, like I said, creep up. It wasn't like they won 3 out of 3 and then, went on some great 15-game winning streak. They won, Boston lost. They win, Boston loses. The 4 games were essential to catching up. And then later, we find out that the teams are tied at the end of the season. So what was supposed to be an insurmountable lead now becomes, "Oh my god, we have to play our rivals for the AL East playoff," and that happens in early October. Bucky Dent and Reggie Jackson hit home runs. Lou Piniella makes an amazing catch in the outfield that probably prevented a couple of runs from scoring, and the ratings are through the roof. Why? Because in the New York and Boston areas, you have a heavy Jewish population. Well, it just happened to be taking place in the afternoon of a Jewish holiday. So Jews went to synagogue, they davened, which is the Hebrew word for pray, and they came home, took off their suits, took off their dresses, got in their everyday clothes, and watched the ball game. In those days, it was the late afternoon. Today, it would be a spectacle on Fox. It would start at 8 o'clock, with first pitch probably being 8:20.
Absolutely. Wow. They caught them, they beat them, and then They went to the World Series. What happened in that World Series?
They're down 2-0 against LA, and they come back to win the next 4. I think that people kind of look at the Yankees askance from those days. They don't acknowledge that they went to the World Series 3 years in a row, 76, 77, 78. 76, they didn't have Reggie Jackson. 77 and 78, they're firing on all cylinders when needed, and didn't go back to the series until 81. But it was a tremendous series with 2 great teams. You can't discount LA's competitiveness, their toughness, their quality. They had amazing players. It could have gone either way, but the Yankees were able to gut it out and capture the World Series title for the 2nd year in a row.
Right. Tommy Lasorda was beside himself.
Oh, yeah, there's a play that I describe where Russell throws the ball to first base, Jackson is on first, and he's in the base path. The ball hits his hip and goes into right field, thereby allowing him to go to second base. And you can see this on YouTube. Lasorda was mic'd up during that World Series, or at least during that game. So you hear his entire argument to the umpires, as well as the umpires' refutation of him. And it's pretty rare for a manager to go toe to toe with an umpire like that, especially during a World Series. But he was so furious. He said Jackson has to get out of the way of the ball. And the umpire said, well, where is he supposed to go? He's not allowed to go out of the base path. And then you had the argument, did Reggie thrust his hip ever so slightly so that the ball would hit it and then go into right field?
That would have been a pretty snap judgment if he did that. Maybe he did. I tell you, interesting. But this is not the only time. We talk about Lasorda going nuts. He went nuts in the Philly Fanatic. He attacked the Fanatic later on in his career.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy with Lasorda, but at the end of the day, he was likable because he was so passionate about baseball. And I'm sure I never had the pleasure of meeting him, but if I did, I imagine that he would be very gracious. If you said you were a fan of another team, he would probably say, that's a great ball club. Keep rooting for that team. I have a feeling that's the way he was with fans.
But we stay away from Dave Kingman, right?
Well, right. Well, I'm talking about with the fans. I have no empirical evidence, but that's just my feeling that that's the type of guy he was, to just not badmouth someone in front of the fans. Now, trash talking to reporters is a different story.
No doubt. The season now ends, and there is this beginning of this mass exodus from New York. Everybody now on the team wants to get out of the team. They were that up. They may have won the World Series, but they were upset enough that they wanted to leave. Tell me about that.
Well, New York has a media pressure all its own. When you are living and working in New York City, you're walking fast, you're talking fast, you compete for everything. It's expensive. It's tremendously hot in the summer. It can be brutally cold in the winter. And players just didn't have the wherewithal to stay here if they didn't have to. They wanted to go to a place where they didn't have microphones from all these different outlets and all these different reporters with notepads after a game, where if you play in a medium market team, that medium market may have 1 or 2 newspapers, and it's an easier lifestyle.
Right. So who left after that season? Who left?
I'd have to go back to the roster. I know Reggie stayed until 81, and he definitely stayed. I know Figueroa was unhappy. He was quoted in an article. And I don't have the roster in front of me about who left and who stayed, but I just sensed that in researching the book, Blaine, Bob Lemon's coolness and calmness was great for the season, but you still had conflicts, you still had tension. Steinbrenner is in the paper all the time, and I didn't know who an owner of the Tigers was, or the Cubs, or
No?
the Twins,
B
but everybody knew who Steinbrenner was
Mhm.
because of these controversies that had emerged primarily with Billy Martin. And then bringing Billy back, and then firing him, and bringing him back, and this whole seesaw with Martin as the manager. Does he stay? Does he go? So it's a great place to work, but it shows you that um, all that glitters isn't gold. When I saw the story about The Offer, which is the miniseries that was made about the making of The Godfather, I did not know that Al Ruddy did not produce The Godfather Part 2. Now, I don't know why, but I suspect The Godfather was enough because people don't realize how exhausting it is. As I got older, I started to realize when I would see a player leave a team like the Yankees, or I would hear about a newscaster leaving Channel 7 or Channel 4 in New York for a smaller market. Why would you do that? Well, an easier lifestyle, an easier commute. You don't have the pressure. You don't have the fans up and down all the time. The fans are tremendously loyal, as you know, in Buffalo to the Bills, where they got a welcome home party, or I shouldn't say party, but they were welcomed at the airport when Norwood missed the kick wide right. So, do you wanna play in that atmosphere where it's easier, where you can just focus on your job rather than what's going on with the reporters and being asked about the soap opera that's playing out in the clubhouse? And the template for this is Roger Maris. Roger Maris's hair was falling out during the home run race between him and Mantle to see who would break Babe Ruth's record.
Right.
That's a tremendous toll that it takes on you personally, and that can only injure you professionally.
No doubt. I thought that Barry Pepper did a fine job portraying Maris in that movie, 61 with an asterisk. That was well done.
I recommend that movie to anybody who wants to learn about baseball. It is such a lovingly crafted movie, and thank God Billy Crystal directed it because he idolized Mickey Mantle growing up, and he also got to know Mantle later on. So he knew certain stories about that season, and what a tremendous story.
Yeah. Yep. Great, great thing. Well, now, the season has ended, the book has ended, but I gotta know, what's next for David Krell? What are you working on now?
Right now, I'm working on 2 books. One is a book about 1986, and the other is a book about the cultural history of baseball in New York City. So stay tuned for that. I have 2 other books coming out this year. One is a biography of Bo Belinsky, and another book which is non-baseball related. It's a Christmas movies book relating to the law. So in other words, using Christmas movies and Christmas TV episodes to illustrate points of law. For example, when the Clampetts celebrate Christmas on the Beverly Hillbillies, that's an opportunity for me to talk about Mr. Drysdale and the wonderful world of private banking and the legal hoops that he would have to jump through. So it'll be a great stocking
Oh,
stuffer
yeah, that
or
will be.
Hanukkah gift for any lawyer in your
Yeah.
family.
Absolutely. And, as a Bo Belinsky fan, I can't wait to read that book, Bo was a force of nature, I'll say that much.
Oh, I can't wait to talk to you about it. That
Yep.
was a labor of love, and I couldn't believe that it hadn't been chronicled before.
Yep, I know. Now, before I go, okay, and I know we're running out of time, but I gotta ask this, David. I'm living down here in Greenville, South Carolina, and
Okay.
everybody wants to know, after the ruling, will Shoeless Joe Jackson get into the Hall of Fame? What's your
I
thoughts on that?
I predict yes. I think there's a great chance of him getting in immediately, certainly within 3 years. Rose, I flip a coin. I just don't know because there's an upswell that's happening online, and I think that's going to translate into a formal protest.
Okay. Well, we're hoping for Shoeless Joe to get in, that's our hopes down here. Yep, David, this has been wonderful. This has been spectacular. You have done a great, great job with this book. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us about this. I'm looking forward to all your other books. I know you're up at Cooperstown a lot. Are you going up to that symposium in May?
I'm speaking at the symposium in 2 weeks, and
Okay.
I'm also delivering an alternative version of Casey at the Bat
Oh, good.
during the banquet. It's a
Yes, yes.
Casey at the Bat, the events as told from an opposing player's point of view.
Wonderful. People don't, and David might not remember this, but I was up presenting. Dave was up presenting. Our paths crossed up at Cooperstown at one time. I liked him from day one. This is a great guy, a great baseball historian, and the fact that he blends it all culturally. David, thank you so much for being with us today on Books and Looks.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Well, I don't know about you, friends, but I learned a heck of a lot talking to David about that book, 1978. So much went on. Again, if you're a baseball fan, you're going to love all the baseball. If you like, you know, all the cultural stuff that went on from Robin Williams and Dallas. We didn't even get a chance to talk about Animal House, the movie. I mean, there was just so much going on. It's a great book. Absolutely great book. One more time, hold it up here. 1978. Yeah, baseball and America in the disco era. You don't want to forget this one, friends. Anyway, on behalf of Books and Looks, this is Blaine DeSantis saying, may all your leaves be pages in a book.